So, hi everyone, I'm Dominique Brossard. I'm professor and chair in the Department of Life Sciences Communication at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to our Spring 2020 Science Communication Colloquium. Today, we're delighted to have Good Christopherson join us. Elizabeth is president and CEO of the Rita Allen Foundation, an organization that invests in transformative ideas in their earliest stage to leverage their growth and promote breakthrough solutions to significant problems. The foundation supports early career biomedical scholars doing pioneer basic research in the fields of cancer, immunology, neuroscience, and pain, seek innovative approaches to fostering informed civic engagement, and develops knowledge and networks to build the effectiveness of the philanthropic sector. Mrs. Christopherson is guiding the foundation through the period of significant growth, and hopefully she'll tell us more about this, including building new investments and coalitions to strengthen the role of science and evidence in civic dialogue and decision-making, especially around contentious issues. The foundation is leading efforts to develop a robust field of civic science, including supporting major initiatives focused on public engagement with science at the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, the American Academy of Art and Science, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and other organizations. It has also recently launched an innovative Civic Science Fellows program, and actually LSC is delighted to be a partner in this enterprise with Emily Hauer, who's here, and Dietram Schöffler, who's also present today. Prior to joining Rita Allen in 2009, Elizabeth was the first female executive director of New Jersey's Public Broadcasting Network. She has served on many regional and national boards, including those of the Science Philanthropy Alliance, iBiology, and the Public Broadcasting Service, PBS. She's the recipient of 5 honorary degrees and numerous awards for public service, including the prestigious Women Who Make a Difference Award from International Women Forum. I'm really delighted to have Elizabeth here today. So please join me virtually in welcoming Elizabeth.
Thank you, Dominique, and so much, and all of you for gathering today. You know, what's not, and you read a very nice introduction, or gave a very nice introduction, Dominique. What's not in there is my huge regard for you and Dietram and others that, yes, for all that you're doing to basically change the way we connect research to practice, do important research, and it couldn't be needed more now. And I also thank Claire and Emily and all the students there. You know, first choice would have been to be in Wisconsin with all of you. That gives us a chance to do what we always care about, which is think about, you know, who we're talking to and what you care about, and read your body language and your smiles or whatever. But thank you for inviting me anyway to be with you virtually. I was glad, Sophia, you pointed out how many people are joining, many opportunities to connect online, and that is becoming an important part of our story too. You know, I'm sitting before a virtual background with the planet Earth because it's Earth Day. That's also part of the civic science story too, is thinking about these issues that are rooted in science that are going to affect all of us, although not equally as we go forward. Earlier today, the National Geographic had an interview with Jane Goodall, who was always one of my heroines for the work that she did early on to explore and be a pioneer about being a steward of our Earth. And I used to keep a screensaver that said, "Hear your heart." And I always like to remember that, because to pay attention what you really care about. And, you know, I care not only, as I imagine many of you do too, about what happens, climate change, but certainly what's happening in this COVID environment where we can't get nearly the kind of information we'd like to have, but need to navigate anyway. So I have, and I hope that this is all working out in terms of a screen share here. But I was reading an article, as many of us are reading many things in the Financial Times recently about this global crisis. And it was really thinking about, again, the COVID not just being a life or death health situation, but we're also quite aware of how it's intersecting with our economy and politics and culture, and also the choices that we're going to have to make, choices that not necessarily, and we know already, not everybody will agree with too. So part of this is because we're approaching things in terms of questions. questions. So we've been asking questions such as, what is the role of science in our democracy and science and society? Or what new approaches do we need to take when scientific expertise is not adequate to express these civic science issues? Or how can we more effectively connect research with practice? The science of communication, engagement, working with policymakers. There's so many actions that need to take place and that are taking place that are not rooted in some of the tremendous research that's been going on for decades and the new research that's needed. And also, how can we better shift conversations and cultures to create norms to advance science as a public good? Yesterday, Emily and I were on a call where someone was making the point that oftentimes when we talk about science at the federal level, we're talking about the need for funding for science, not the benefit of science and what it means in our lives. But I want to tell you a little bit more about where I sit and slightly how I got there. Here's a picture of Rita Allen and her husband Charles, and how I arrived at this post at Rita Allen was based on some lived experience that has turned out to be so helpful in the current work that we're doing. So for 15 years, I was running a public television and radio network in one of the most diverse states in the country, New Jersey. Of course, New Jersey, sandwiched between Philadelphia and New York, has always had an acute need for having its own voice to represent the people of New Jersey. And the network also, which is licensed to the state, continually needed to make the case for communication, engagement, and public benefit. So thinking about some of these questions came on, were questions that I've been thinking about for a number of years before coming to Rita Allen. So after serving about 7 governors, they didn't all serve for 4 years at once, and it wasn't all, and it started before public broadcasting, I was offered what I thought was an exquisite opportunity, and that is to take a startup, and I'll say it's a startup because about a decade ago, all the family members had died, new money came in, and while it had 30-year history of serving biomedical scholars, it didn't have even a general ledger, needed to build its board, needed to build its staff, and needed to figure out what it considered to be extremely important in addition to the scientists we were serving. Now, the first benefactors, Charles and Rita Allen, Charles was an investment banker and Rita Allen was a theatrical producer. Her father was a doctor, but they were thinking about where their then relatively small foundation could make a huge difference. And so they talked to Howard Hyatt. Howard Hyatt was dean of the Harvard School of Public Health, and he's had people in his network that includes Paul Farmer and others, but he's always believed in the importance of mentoring. In other words, if you can have the opportunity to take really bright people at the early stages of their careers and continue to support them, that there'll be a tremendous opportunity to make a difference. So Howard is on the right here, who is 90 years old just a year or two ago. When I went up to see him, there was a little celebration for him, and he still was interested in reaching out and mentoring young people. Very, very inspiring. We have always, in other words, for many years, we've invested early. We've invested in rising stars, pioneering ideas, scaffolding, and deep listening and learning. And the first photo on the top is one that may be familiar to some of you, and that is Ron Bale. He's now head of Genelia at HHMI, but he's also the founder of iBiology, where Elliot Kirshner has been working. And I know that you had a wonderful talk by Elliot earlier this semester. But it's Ron's vision to bring scientists, communicators, and others together is deeply inspiring. He's been working to create a more democratic access to biology and to learning. He's also been inspiring in the sense that he was a Rita Allen scholar, he is a scientist, but he's also been an entrepreneur, and he's thought about the fact that even if you had just a little bit of money, but you felt passionately about an idea, that you should get started and do it despite. And so it was very exciting when he created with Elliot's team, Human Nature, the documentary trailer that Elliot shared with you all. And we had had a discussion, by full disclosure, I serve on his board, iBiology. We had had a discussion about partnering with social scientists to develop outreach plans. And at some point, you need to come back to Dietram Schufle and ask him about his experience, because the answer was yes. Dietram and clicked very well with Elliot. Emily's also been very much involved in this. And it's been an opportunity, I think, to model how people in media need and can work with people who have expertise in science communication. We also had a chance to bring human nature down to the Life Sciences Board, where I was thrilled to see Dominique at the table. And Dominique, was that I'm going to just interrupt at that point. How many years have you been on the Life Sciences Board? How many years have they had a social scientist on the Life Sciences Board?
Well, yeah, I think that's like a new thing. I think it's my second year.
Exactly. So to say that while research has been going on for a long time, connecting research to at different seats around the table has not necessarily been that long in coming. And part of the ways that we have been figuring that out is by supporting such things and being part of the Oxford Handbook on Science of Science Communication that Kathleen Hall Jameson put together. Dietram and others have been involved too. And our charge was to reach out to philanthropy and see if any of them were connecting research with their practice. And the answer was really hard to find people who were connecting social science research. Next, we also then helped with support a effort at the National Academy, developing research agenda priorities, and the American Academy of Arts and Sciences about their public engagement with science. And we did more too. All this is to say that I think that we were thinking about some very key points here, that we have emerging science with some profound societal implications, wicked, post-normal, and complex, whether it's gene editing, artificial intelligence, synthetic biology, ocean conservation, and just a few. And meanwhile, as we all know, scientists are facing challenging funding and institutional environment. And adding to this, a rapidly changing media environment. I think Dietram and Dominique and Dietram, you just wrote about some social media engagement too. And in the age of social media, really our vulnerability to misinformation is certainly heightened. People have been writing now about conspiracy theories and how that's enabled through social media. But our media environments and receptiveness to facts are further fragmented, I think, by the hyper-polarization. We see just really some fundamental political values at record levels. And despite this, we also see that scientists are eager to be connected in ways that they haven't before. So part of what we've learned is that what isn't working is traditionally, and we've seen this over and over again, is the broadcast model, where we think that if we have basically more information, more facts, people will receive it and problem solved, that one size fits all. The silos that we've seen with experts, clearly we need more of a convergence model where different people bring their strengths to create new coalitions and new problem-solving teams. A diversity deficit, we'll speak about more of that later, and a wide gap, as we started to talk about, for research and practice, and neglecting dialogue and norms. I mean, where can we find the spaces to be talking about what needs to change, and no central source for best practices for agents of change. Some of these things are changing with the work, for example, done, Dominique and Dietram, with you and others, but much more needs to happen. So there was a brief time, it seemed to some, that the emergency of a global pandemic would allow partisanship to set aside and even more cooperation. But I think we're all seeing politicization and culture wars emerge in familiar ways, yet strongly. And so there's a huge urgency, as we know, to respond, and to respond in a way that attends to social scientific knowledge about what is and isn't effective. And we've supported a number of research practice partnerships, beginning with the National Academy, including connecting Brendan Nyan when he was at Dartmouth with the Vermont Department of Public Health to test messages to parents about vaccinations. And one takeaway that, of course, we've heard is that it's complicated because providing more facts on the issues like vaccinations can result in even greater polarization. And so more needs to be done, again, to help people understand. We know that's going to be acutely important as we need more people vaccinated during COVID. Wanted to mention and really underscore this is something that is, of course, acutely painful and acutely evident, and that is the cracks in our society, the gaps that we're seeing over and over. Who's most, inequitably affected, who has fewest resources. Work done at Robert Wood Johnson, for example, talks about where you live being related clearly to many other disparities in our society. So we're, making huge priorities on how we can support the inclusion of vulnerable people in decisions that will affect them most. How we can share evidence-based information that meets people's needs is believable, and more about this too. Let me then mention, wrote an article for SSIR with Deidre Shipley and Brooke Smith. And again, it was about the civic science imperative that was a couple years ago, really talking about the need for bringing more science to communication, engagement, response, recovery, more inclusively and equitably. I think we recognize the need to shift the culture of science and of civic engagement. Something interesting about the Rita Allen Foundation, among the domains that early on, 10 years ago, we started to think about and we'd fund, we thought about our scientists course, we thought about civic engagement being clearly important, and we thought about media and communication also being a third area that we'd want to support. But we thought early on about them as being in separate domains, not being intersected. And now much of our work and most of our work is really coming at the intersection of these domains too. Because we know that science is really deeply embedded in all of our lives, and that really to thrive as a democratic society, we need to make some tremendous shifts. All right, so then our response has been to think about building a lab for civic science. Just as we have thought about our scientists in their biomedical labs and how they're bringing in people no longer just biologists, but data scientists and physicists and engineers. So we started thinking about how we could take a coalition of the willing. And again, our vision, a short time ago was that maybe we'd start with maybe 3 to 6 fellows, 3 to 6 host partners, and just a few funders to just beta test something. And in a year, we're up to a much bigger network, and it's growing in terms of the kind of folks who are reaching out to us, even internationally, and in inquiring about, seeing a need and sharing an opportunity to work together around shared aspirations and values with evidence-based work, new voices, new approaches, underserved audiences, and really to invest in a cohort for peer learning. There's been research done on how effective that is, more effective than sometimes reading it out of a paper, but how we can see that we can support each other in our work. So our program now has more than 20 partners, more than 6 co-funders with combined assets of more than 20 billion, and networks with a combined audience in the tens of millions, as well as 15 civic science fellows in the inaugural cohort. So here's, and I won't have the opportunity to go through all of them, but they are an extraordinary group, and we are creating opportunities for them to provide and participate in webinars. So glad to include you if you'd like on any of these webinars too. Our launch was only just 2 months ago in February at the Gates Foundation. We brought our fellows together along with resource partners and our host partners and funding partners. And now, of course, that seems like a million years ago to all of us too. Let me just tell you about a couple of them and highlight, so you might get a sense of the kind of work they're doing. So Adnan Wazi was part of the inspiration for the Civic Science Fellows. We supported him to work with WGBH and NOVA to cultivate some new audiences and new platforms. He was struck by the value of social science communications research and the need for it to spread much wider in communities of practice to help people get beyond the deficit model, or what he calls facts-plaining. Now, a second fellow is joining him at WGBH, Ray Maktoufi, who is looking specific methods of combating misinformation, and whose work, like so many fellows, has taken on new urgency in the face of our current environment. And among the innovative methods their teams are exploring, a space-themed escape room live streamed on Twitch and featuring teams of young YouTube stars. So they really are doing some innovative work. Then, of course, we have Shannon, who has been at Public Lab, and she responded to a crisis around the BPU oil spill and has been developing over a number of years the open-sourced tools, not only to help the community have agency to measure their environmental area, environmental quality of their area, but also to create open source tools that are now being used globally, worldwide. And she's now transitioning to creating an open environmental data project. Kathy Pham at the Shorenstein Center on Media, Politics, and Public Policy at the Harvard Kennedy School. I met her at a meeting at Harvard, which was called Please Don't Include Me, which is really highlighting the tension between, our government and privacy, digital privacy. And, we're have another fellow also working on this too, particularly around protecting children now at Consumer Reports. Again, these are just, you'll have an opportunity if you want to read more and hear more about them. But to tell you a little bit more about some of the others who are in this lab, if you will, are our resource partners. And I know that Dietram, Dominique, and Emily Howell are among our valued partners working with our fellows to design projects, as well as we have other experts from other areas, including, say, Feedback Labs, which has been an effort among a core group of funders, including Rita Allen, to help change the way philanthropy practices, and that is to start listening to the beneficiaries before you design the solution, to value lived experience as well as expertise. With solutions journalism, which of course is changing the way journalism is engaging communities around too. So we are doing a number of webinars with community-centric approaches, some collabs, conversations to support questions and dialogues. Basically, we do put a lot of value. So just like we talk science of when we think about research, I think there's a science, we all know about the scientific process, but we have a process also that we like to follow at the foundation, and that is to begin by researching who else is out there, listening to our audiences, then designing with them, hopefully co-designing with them, piloting, assessing, and sharing. And this will give you a little bit more information, and can share this later at any point, about some of our some of the resources. But the real point is to think about where you might fit in the picture, because just imagining, as we were talking early on with Claire and Emily before we all got on, is that future leaders in the civic science world that we need. We know many of you are on the phone too. And then I'm going to end with just two more slides, and one is a favorite quotation from John Powell, because it reminds me to think about how we include and how we belong and how we create our community, our civic science community, with some very important intentions, where he says to belong is not just to be a citizen or a member in the weakest sense, but to be able to participate in co-creating the thing you belong to. That's really important, co-creating. This makes a difference. This makes it different than inclusion, because bridging requires that we create space to hear and see each other. It does not require agreement. And at a deeper level, bridging is about co-constructing a larger we. I really like that, co-constructing a larger we, with shifting differences and similarities. And through bridging, people experience being heard, being seen, and being cared for. And I hope that connects and resonates with you also. I just, of course, have to say that part of our lab, success is never a solo sport. And so we've had a lot of iteration, even back and forth, on what we might include and share with you from Emily, from Kate Belly, Sam Dyson, others in our environment, just as we continue to think about how we communicate the values and the opportunities here with civic science. And of course, I'd be delighted to have a conversation now, Dominique, with those on the call.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth.